Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the ColdFusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. This is episode 101 on April 27th, 2021. I'm Gavin.
How's it going, Gavin?
Yeah, doing pretty good, Brad. How about yourself?
You feel so far away. Hello over there. Can you hear me on your side of the studio?
We have to get the social distancing in place. Apparently, we've been violating that for the last year. So.
Well, yeah. So this giant screen hanging between us is the perfect social distancing size.
Apparently.
To keep us safe.
Yep, exactly. So first up, let's thank our sponsors, Order Solutions. Without them, we wouldn't be able to make this podcast. So obviously, Ordis is the maker of almost every box out there: ColdBox, CommandBox, ForgeBox, TestBox. A few ways you can say thank you to Ordis is like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you'll get subscription updates when we go live if you want to watch along and chat in the chat room with us and give us a little feedback. And then also, you can sign up for a free or paid account on CFCasts, which is releasing new content every week. And then we also have another way. We have a new book, which we'll tell you a little bit more about soon. The 102 ColdBox HMVC Quick Tips and Tricks on Gumroad. And with that, we actually have a way for you to get a few free tips. So we'll tell you about that shortly. And also, we have all of our wonderful, lovely Patreon supporters, don't we, Brad?
We do mean lovely. You guys are just the best. You're smart, and you're handsome or beautiful as it may be. Just real stand-up men and women.
Yep. And if you want to find out more about our Patreon offerings, you can go to patreon.com/ordersolutions. And right now, there are 36 patrons providing 83% of this podcast. So once we get to 100%, then we can start, putting the Patreon funding towards other great projects. That
what we need in the background of our studio here, our live actual physical studio that we're totally in, wink wink, is like the big thermometer, that shows like the Patreon support, and it can go up every week.
We can
throw that out there.
Yeah, maybe we will.
I'm the idea guy. Somebody else can implement it. I just come up with the ideas.
For sure. So thanks to everyone who supports us on Patreon, and we'll tell you more about them at the end of the show, and obviously Order Solutions. Okay, let's get it to the news. So the most important thing, of course, is us. So we made it to 100 episodes last week. So we had 4 people on as hosts last week. We had a couple extra little things, but one of the things we did was we had a little raffle for those who answered 5 Ordis trivia questions complete. And so we had basically the whole week open, and we just picked the 5 winners for those packages, and they're each going to get a Box Life swag package. So, hold on. We got Will saying something here. The challenge will become his Patreon as soon as someone can pronounce his last name properly. Okay.
De Bruin, right? Will de Bruin.
Maybe. I'll let Brad try that one. Okay. So we had quite a few people into the raffle, and those watching had a head start over those listening, but that's okay. You all had time to fill it in. Oh, apparently we're still wrong, Brad.
He says no. Sorry, we don't have any experts on Dutch names here.
Yeah.
We're all clueless.
Sorry, we try. And so the 5 winners are, you want to list them off, Brad?
Yeah, David Bellinger, Scott Steinbeck, Will de Bruin, or however you pronounce it, Matthew Clemente, and Matthew Brown. So the Matthews have the clear lead on the rest of the names.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep, so you should be able to get an email, I believe, with a notification, and they'll get your details to be able to get that sent out to you. So congratulations, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for participating and tuning into our 100th episode via YouTube or via your podcast player. A bit of news about that, too. If you're listening to your podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Apple decided to shake up the world and change everything and break a lot of stuff. So
they're being revolutionary, Gavin.
Yep. So apparently it's messing everyone's iFeed, their feed up, because they're changing from a normal RSS feed to this Apple subscription thing. But even that's broken. So if you're listening on Apple, let us know if they don't show up there, and we'll try and figure out what to do, because right now everyone's a little confused. So we're working on
Isn't
it,
that
but
isn't that like Apple to snub the global standard for something and create their own proprietary format that doesn't quite work?
yep, pretty much. And then they'll force everybody to use it just because they can. Because their phone probably wants their. I'm sure they'll probably update the podcast player on their iPhone to just not use anybody else's subscription service. I mean, it pretty much does that already, I believe. But anyway, so if you don't see us there, let us know.
Well, the best way to watch the podcast is live, where you can be a part of the jokes in the comment section. Just gonna throw that out there.
Yep, we have fun in the chat, and they keep us on point too most of the time.
Or distract us, one or the other.
Yep.
So I hear, according to these show notes here, that the Adobe ColdFusion certification price drops.
Yeah, I
So
saw
what
this on Twitter.
149.
Yeah, it went down to 149. The introductory offer of 499 went away, and now they're down to 149. So I don't know if that's just because
Wow.
they've got more videos and they're trying to just gather the reach, especially with 2021 coming out. Maybe they wanted to,
Or maybe nobody
update that.
signed up, and that was like a please, for goodness sakes, sign up.
Possibly. I know that the 499 price was what they actually did at CF Summit in person. So maybe they realized with the online, they can actually streamline things a little bit more. It's a little more efficient, so they don't have to charge the same amount. But
Yeah, I
regardless,
mean, I could see that. I mean, the in-person trainings is still like a ton of people in the room, but at least you're in person and you can ask live questions and stuff. So it kind of makes a little bit of sense, I guess. The online exams is something they have less, physical cost. But still, I mean, the takeaway is that's good news for anyone considering taking the certification.
yeah, I mean, and it definitely has a lot of good content. They have 50 plus videos online, basically professionals who have a basic to advanced level proficiency in any language can understand how it works. So they're saying that even if you want to get up and started with ColdFusion and you're not using it already, these videos should help you get there. So, not a bad course price. Go through the process. They've got the tests and everything. But yeah, for 150, I mean, pretty competitive. So if you were thinking about it, but you just couldn't quite make yourself, take that plunge, now it's a little cheaper, a little easier. So 150.
150.
Yep. Okay. I know Eric is very happy, but he's not here to talk about it. But his pull request for the Postgres driver repo update has been successfully merged.
Well, that's
So,
pretty cool because that's like the actual official, PostgreSQL JDBC driver, and he can now claim that he's got his own code merged into that project.
yeah, so now he's a Java developer.
Yeah,
Yep.
he found a bug with how it was dealing dealing with some of the crazy like returning identities or something or other. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, they merged it in without really giving him much hassle. Charlie asked in a chat, "Do we have a link to share?" Are you asking about the link for Eric's pull request, or are you asking about the link to that Adobe certification?
I think he's
I'm
talking about the certification, so I just posted it.
okay.
Yeah. Eric gave us a bit of a rundown a couple of weeks ago now on the pull request. Yeah. And Charlie's asked about something about the shared news of the price drop. I saw it on Twitter. I think Mark actually posted something about a great price. I just know that I went back and looked at the old prices in December, and they were definitely $4.99, like I remember. So I did. I know I saw the price. I can't remember the tweet exactly, Charlie. Okay. So yeah. So Eric got that merged in. Of course, that means once the new driver is built, you could update to use that one. But who knows when Lucy and Adobe will update their drivers to use it.
Yeah,
So,
that's the problem with these real downstream projects is, Eric has to wait for the PostgreSQL driver to come out with a new version of their JDBC driver. Then he has to wait for Lucy to, update their extension. And then, who knows how long it'll take before Lucy starts including that Postgres driver, by default. It's always the problem when you fix something in a downstream project is sometimes it can be, a year before it's, widely available. But hopefully it's not as long.
yep. And at least that way, if we have someone using Postgres, we can always point them to that driver specifically. if needed.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually a good point. If somebody, you could ask Eric for the details. This fix, I think, specifically when you're trying to return IDs or something, it had to do with running like an update and a select in the same query or something.
Basically, if you
Anyway,
want the results, it was always expecting ID keys to come back. But if you're doing an update, there are no ID keys.
But if this was a particular bug biting you, you could probably go grab like a snapshot build of the PostgreSQL JDBC driver, put it in your class path, and just add it manually as like an other JDBC driver in either Lucy or Adobe ColdFusion. You'd be able to use it right away. It's not as nice as just using the baked-in driver for the CF engine, but that is a nice thing about the way that CFML engines use those JDBC drivers.
For sure. Yep. Okay.
All right, so got an Adobe webinar coming up, building modern web apps with Content Box modular CMS with Luis Majano.
Yep.
Who is this guy?
Yeah, exactly. I just saw that pop up on the news feed. So I know that he actually did a presentation just recently on Content Box modular CMS for the Audis webinar, and so now he's doing one for the Adobe webinars as well. So they'll get an overview of the CMS platform, how to leverage not only the content-based applications, but also many modern web applications with the powerless, headless API and ColdFusion services. So you can register for that, and I'll share the link here in the chat.
That's May 5th.
May 5th at 12 p.m.
12 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, so that's going to be what?
11 your time.
11 a.m. Central and 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yep.
So and the 5th is just a little over a week away. It's weird because I'm like, that's May, right? That's next month. That's like a week.
Yeah, next week.
Which also means that school is very close to being out, which is just...
Maybe. I know a lot of our schools here started late, even for the online stuff,
really?
So they're going to go halfway into June or late June.
We just had snow like literally last week, and so it doesn't even feel like, we're this close to quote-unquote summer. It's been a messed up year.
For sure. But
all right, we'll mark that down. That's in a week and a day for Luis.
Yep, May 5th.
And if you're looking to perhaps migrate from like a hypothetical situation where maybe you use something like Mira and you don't like their current new licensing, this could be for you.
Yep. And if you want to just see how we're building that, like I said, we're building some nice new pieces into that. So, and with that, actually, there's a new CBORM update coming out. And that's actually to help support that. And so we'll have a little more information on that. But if you're using CBORM, it has a couple of nice new little features that Luis has pushed out there just to get that out the door. So we'll let you know more about that as well. I'm sure there'll be a blog post coming up soon. Okay. After that, we have the Adobe webinar series. So separate from the webinar that Luis is giving, they've got this ongoing API creation and management series. And I don't know if Brian Seppi is doing all of them, but definitely a lot of them. So he's working on that. And so you can find out some more information at the link I'm about to post here. But there's 7 different webinars. And the first 2 happened March 24th and March 25th. The next 2 are April 28th and 29th. So this week we have 2 different ones. Yep.
Tomorrow and the next day. The day after tomorrow. Isn't that like Armageddon movie or something? The day after tomorrow.
Yeah. So the next 2 days, and then there's 3 in May 12th, 13th, and 24th. And the recordings are available, and I'm going to share that in the chat as well. But if you want to get the previous ones, if you register, you'll get updates and emails because there's quite a few of them. But it looks like a great series, starting from just basically publishing APIs, how to build RESTful APIs with and without the API manager. So looking at securing, publishing, monitoring, all of that. And apparently very easy hands-on examples, and then some good discussion about that too.
Awesome. So there's another online CF meetup happening, which appears that Charlie is actually giving. He's giving his own online CF meetup. That's so meta. So this one is installing ColdFusion 2021 choices, challenges, and solutions. So knowing Charlie, I have a feeling he'll probably cover every possible conceivable choice, challenge, and solution. So that's pretty cool. I'm just scanning the topic description here to make sure he's covering command box. Oh, I don't know. I don't see it in there. Oh, we'll have to see. Actually, it looks like the topic description is just a very high-level overview. So,
Yeah, I think he's just going through all the different options. I know the couple people are posting about not being able to get, you know, the files directly for downloads install via
he's
Yum,
not
etc.
covering command box.
Yeah, but he's actually trying to install the server sort of old school style. So, but that will
Old
be,
school. That's so 2020, Gavin.
yeah, still a lot of people using it, Brad. So that's Thursday, April 29th at 11 a.m. Central Time.
So that's just 2 days from now, right?
Yep,
Am
a
I
couple of days away.
reading my calendar correctly? That
Yep.
is Thursday. So that doesn't conflict with the API thing we were just talking about, does it? What times are these at?
Those ones you have to register to find the actual time for those.
So no one knows when the Adobe Webinar series actually happens.
Well, there was so
It's like,
many dates, I didn't put the times next to all of them, so I'm not sure
okay,
exactly.
well, so Charlie's is this Thursday at 11 a.m. Central, but we don't know what time the webinar series is. I'm assuming Charlie probably didn't overlap it. I'm just curious if people wanted to catch both of them.
Yep,
Here we
they
go.
are sharing the recordings with the Adobe Webinar series, and with that, the good thing is they're made
It's right
available
here.
because they're building on top of it. Oh, you found it?
Yeah, the one on April 29th is 12 p.m. Eastern,
So
which
that's
is going to
9
be
a.m. No, 11 a.m. Central, so same
going
time.
to be 11 Central. So it looks like this actually does overlap at the same time. So if you're wanting to catch both of these, you will need to watch one of them live and the recording of the other one afterwards, or set up two screens and just listen to them simultaneously. Be like dueling banjos with Charlie and Brian.
Yeah, but they both will be recorded, so uh, I'm sure you'll pick the right one and watch the other one with the recording. Okay, just for those who didn't know about Luis's webinar last week about building modern web apps with Content Box, that was recorded and up on CFCasts, so we'll share that one here for you.
So if you watch that recording, does that mean you can skip Luis's
I know
Adobe
he's
version
always
of it?
adding a little more to it. He's still working on the Content Box beta. I think it's out in beta now, and he's still working on getting some additional features out, like the CBORM update he pushed out as well, to just adding more headless API features. So I'm sure there'll be a little more, but if you want to get a taste for it, that video is available on CFCasts right now. And he presented that last week, April 23rd. Okay. We also have a little more of an update on that book from Luis. So it's been on Gumroad for a while. You probably heard us talking about it. But we actually have the marketing page up on the Audis website too, under Learn Books. So we have 102 tips and tricks from Luis. So it's got the pretty cover on it, nice design. It's got a little testimonial here from Patrick. And if you sign up using your email, you get on our mailing list, but you also get 10 free tips. So if you're not sure if you want to buy it or not, I recommend you go put your email in there, and it'll keep you up to date when we're releasing other books or doing training, etc. But you can get those 10 free tips right there. So I give you a little taste test. And here are some tips that are included. Some environment variables in the config, fluent if statements using wins, command box ColdFusion commands, structural query strings. There's a whole bunch of them here. You can go through, you can see all 103 tips and what they're all about.
103, what?
102, sorry. There you go. Brad is doing a new book on 103 command box commands.
Wow, we actually literally have all of them there. If you just keep clicking the next button.
Yep, so you can look through them
But
all and
wait,
check it out.
there's more.
Yep, so you can obviously order, follow, get some news. So that is available. I'm going to share that link with the show notes, with the chat as well. But yeah, so if you want a little more information, you're not sold on the book completely yet, you can go ahead and check that page out and maybe get those 10 free tips. All for the price of your email address. Which, if you don't like our emails, obviously you can unsubscribe as well. So, pretty good there. Okay.
Looks like we have some new CFCast content here.
Yep. So this week, we just actually released that video that Luis had, the Content Modular CMS
webinar. So that was the update for this week. And I know we have more Command Box 0 to Hero videos coming out soon. We got some more what's new with ColdFusion 6 coming, and they're working on up and running with Quick, Logbox 101, and using DocBox. So we got a lot of content in the works right now that's about to be released. But this last week, check out that Luis Majano Audis webinar.
So if I log into CFCasts, do we have a screen in here that shows me like the newest stuff, like sorted by date?
Yep. So if you click on Browse at the very top.
Okay. I usually use the search, not the browse.
I'll show you guys for those watching. So click on
so it
Browse
looks like
at the
it's
top
sorted
here.
automatically then. Published 1 day ago.
Yep.
Published
so
8 days ago.
You can see which ones are free and which ones you need a subscription for. You can also change the languages here too. So if you turn on the other language, you can see the English and Spanish. So there'll be some other content that you wouldn't normally see. So if I go back to just Spanish, you'll see when they were released. So there's quite a few videos released a month ago and a few months ago.
So if you have an account, but it's been maybe a couple months since you've logged in last, and you want to see what specifically is new, you just click on that browse, and you can see everything that's been added since the last time you visited.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So next up, let's talk about conferences and training. So in case you missed it, Redis Conf was last week, April 20th to 21st. The hackathon goes on to May 20th, and that's when you actually have those videos available to watch on demand. So basically, you have 1 month from when the conference happened. You can check out all the videos on, all the pros and cons of Redis, including all their different products. So they've got Redis Search and a whole bunch of things. The AI looks pretty interesting too. So a lot of cool things to check out there. We also have Atlassian Teams coming up. So this is April 28th and 30th, so later this week. And so basically it's about building better teammates, having tools to make your team work better, especially in a remote world. And that used to be called Summit, but now it's called Atlassian Teams. So that's available, and I'll share the link for that. Anyone who wants to sign up for that. Again, it's a free conference made by Atlassian, the makers of Jira and some other products like that. And then next up, AWS in May, right, Brad?
Yeah, May 12th and 13th is the online and free AWS Summit Online America's Edition.
Yep, so they have a lot of great tracks there, so anything from beginner to basically ninja level. They have all the different the levels there, and as I always say, I really like the hands-on workshops and labs they do, but also, the stories, the basically people tell you about their problems and how they solve them and what solutions help them. And I think that can give you a really good idea of, how that might be useful for you in your business.
They've got an agenda at a glance PDF. If you click on their page under agenda, it looks like they have the following tracks: AI/ML, so artificial intelligence, machine learning. S1 path. They have another track of analytics, database, and blockchain. Another path on EC2 compute, end user computing. Another one for industry and public sectors, kind of cool. Security, networking, and global infrastructure is another track. They have, what's MAD? MAD, open source and robotics. I don't know what MAD stands for. Then one for media solutions, marketplace management, government. One for storage and migrations. This looks fun. IoT, business intelligence, customer engagement, and then sessions in Francois. So they have French sessions. I didn't realize that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so quite a lot of interesting things here. So definitely check that out if you want to find a little bit more about it. It's a great conference. I really enjoyed it the times I've attended. So.
Oh, MAD stands for Make and Destroy Robotics.
Oh, really?
Is that what that means?
Interesting.
I'm just guessing. I googled MAD robotics and I found Make and Destroy. So I don't know if that's what they mean.
Maybe.
But it sounds interesting. Sounds cool. Destroy, man.
Yep. Well, next up, we have another conference here. So Percona Live Online is going to be the same time, May 12th to 13th. And for anyone who hasn't heard of Percona, they make some really great database tools, basically. I've used some of their tools in the past. I know you've talked about them as well, Brad, for all sorts of things, really. I mean, they have pretty much all the high-end tools for anything you can do with a database. So, but this event is...
so that starts the day that AWS Summit Online ends, May 12th.
Yeah.
No, it overlaps the same days as AWS. Sorry, 12th and 13th for both of them.
Yep. And so, if you want to, you can even watch the 2020 sessions as well. So, but yeah, they've got some great products. Definitely recommend checking them out. I like their stuff for their backups, migrations, things like that, keeping databases in sync. They kind of make it easy to do a lot of the tricky things, setting up replication, etc. So, pretty neat.
So Dockercon is coming still end of May, so it's actually a month from today, May 27th. Free one-day virtual event.
Yep. The only thing I don't like is that it's got cube everywhere.
It's got what?
Kubernetes stuff everywhere.
Oh.
But their agenda's up here as well, so you can see some of the different things. And last year they had this interview section, so they basically just had interviews the whole time with different people, which was kind of neat. But they had all these different categories again, so you can look at live panels, track C, B, A, D, so you can look through optimizing Docker builds, for example, do not ignore, Docker ignore. So there's a lot of stuff in here. And again,
I only see one session with the word swarm in its name. Give us swarm. Give us swarm.
Yeah. But Dockercon is definitely a great conference. A lot of great speakers there, lots of experience in the industry. So it's nice to see some of the bigger providers, having people sit there as well. So should be able to find some big names, and I guarantee you all those sessions are amazing. So, okay. We also have some Audis workshops coming up soon. We're getting those dates out as well. And then a call for speakers should be anytime now. I know they're almost finished with the call for speaker form. So we should have that open. I think the plan is to have the call for speakers open in May and start making choices about it in June.
For Into the Box?
For Into the Box in September. So we'll be changing up the format a little bit to make it a little more friendly, have some more time zones friendly for European viewers as well, since unfortunately that they can't travel and spend time together at this point. So we'll be looking at doing that in September online. But things are opening up pretty fast, so who knows? And the ITB and LATAM, they may actually have that in person, but worst case, we'll have it online in December. And for those who want more conferences, you can't get enough. Comps.tech has a lot of great conferences listed there, and you pick by your language. Okay.
Blogs, tweets, and videos.
Yep.
What do we have?
So David Byers has been running this little ColdFusion 101 series, and he actually did a webinar a little while back on it. But so he's got two more in his series here. So he's got Tag Scripts and Functions Part 2 on scripts and Part 3 on functions. So both of those are now available up on the ColdFusion Adobe portal. And
this has a preamble. You know it's going to be long when you click on it and you see a preamble.
Pretty formal.
Actually, it's not that awful long.
No, but yeah. So the assumptions, functions, and so it links out. But I like it. It's just nice, simple examples here. And again, this is made for basically beginners. If you got someone new on your team, or you've got someone who's starting to code, maybe they've got another position like QA or design that they're trying to get in, this series would be perfect for them. Or even managers that want to understand it a little better. But real basics, function attributes and that type of thing. So he links out to a few good links as well. But again, this is number 2 and number 3 in that series of getting started. So thanks, David, for sharing that. And share that with anybody you think should check those out. Okay, we have a new blog post here. And this blog post is relevant because April 20th was the last day that certain the JVMs were going to support the older TLS update. So basically, they updated on that date. So any versions past that will no longer support those
By
JVM
default,
types.
right?
Yeah, by default, you can
And
override
isn't this
it.
the same thing that we covered last week that Pete Freitag had
Well, he was saying
about?
that from April 21st on, that would happen. But these are just updates released. So I think this just happened to coincide with that timeline. Basically, they knew they were going to release these versions. And then after that, the next version will have that TLS disabled by default for those versions. So again, Java 11 and Java 8, the long-term support updates were released last week. And then if you want to learn more about them, should you update, Charlie's got a really good detailed blog post as usual. But yeah, these are basically the updates, how to obtain them, why you may want to use them or not. And so Charlie's got lots of great information on that.
If you use command box, it'll just automatically download the latest Java version as soon as it comes out.
Yep.
That's actually how I know when OpenJDK is made, or adopt OpenJDK is made a release. I start a command box server one morning and it was like, oh, download a new version of Java, sweet. And then I just go on with my day.
Yep.
Of course,
So
that's for development. I wouldn't do that on production. That could be a little dicey.
yeah. So Java 8 and Java 11 updates, the blog post, give you a little more information about how to find it.
Actually, pretty certain those are on adopt. Allow me to run the Java search command from my command box CLI. All right. JDK 11 update 11 is the latest version that's on adopt, which is what Charlie mentioned. And then if I search for OpenJDK 8, it's 292. That's interesting. I'm just looking, Charlie's blog is talking about 291, but the latest version for the adopt OpenJDK API is actually 292. Release date 21st of April.
Oh, that must be the one the day after. That'll probably have the new TLS stuff that Pete mentioned in his blog last week.
It's possible. I've actually been curious. I've noticed that the updates for the Java 8 always seem to be like a 2, like a like 292 or what are the other versions they have? I don't know. It seems like they have a certain like pattern they follow, and I've never quite been sure what it is. But I've noticed that they tend to have like a certain pattern they follow when they name them. Let's see, what is it? Release. Okay. I ran the command box command Java search version equals OpenJDK 8 release equals empty string. So they have 292, 282. Actually, 275 doesn't really follow. 272, 265, 262, 252, 242, 232, 222. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but they always seem to like end with a 2. I don't know what that means inside. Even 212, 202, 192. I'm really curious what the reasoning is.
I wonder if the 5 is the patch where they had to do something outside of the normal
Yeah,
release
no, yeah.
pattern
There's a few that'll end in 1, like 181. Most of them end in 2, and there's a couple that'll end in 5. And I'm guessing that has some particular meaning, but I've never actually known that. I've always just seen their version numbers and thought to myself, they follow some sort of pattern there.
Yep. And
Maybe
so
that'll
Charlie
be
was
the topic of some future Charlie blog post.
Yep, and Charlie was mentioning that these were specifically Oracle JVM in his blog post, which that's what Adobe CF officially supports. So OpenJDK that you just mentioned is a little different.
Not much. I mean, the OpenJDK source code is very similar to the Oracle, and they pretty much match the version numbers. So
yeah, that makes sense. But yeah,
I mean,
just for Adobe support reasons.
Right, exactly. If you want Adobe to support it, then you want to use the Oracle JDK. But there's very few differences if you're not looking for Adobe support.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the next blog post. We have one from the Computer Know-How guys, and this one's a interesting one because it's titled "Why I Ask Dumb Questions." So this one was kind of interesting. Abram over there is a QA tester. And so, he helps basically test out code that the team writes. And so first, he used to do it where he basically would try and understand the code and then test it. But what he's trying to do now is decided that asking dumb questions and trying to make the code do dumb things is actually a good way to test it, because he doesn't make any assumptions. He basically just tries to test it, and then using the test, he figures out what the code does, and then he goes and checks, is that what it's supposed to do? And so,
Isn't that called fuzzing?
Maybe. I mean,
I
basically,
thought like when you fill out a form and you put text in the age field just to see if it'll blow up. I think that's called fuzzing.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, normally you figure out what it should do, and then you kind of test around it. But what he's saying is he has no idea what the code does. He just tries to test it, and then based on that, then he will learn what the code actually supports. And then from there, he figures out, okay, should it? Because obviously you can put stuff in the wrong field, and go from there. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting, just sort of like trying to figure out, different ways to test things, and, maybe trying to learn what something does before you test it may not be the best way to do it. Maybe, testing like your end user would, like they have no idea how your system works, and they'll find ways to break it like no other, because they don't know how it's supposed to work. So they don't work within your mindset. And usually as the one who created the code, you know what it should do, so you don't test it the same as someone else from a fresh perspective. So thought that was just
Yeah, I understand what he's
post.
saying. I think it's sort of weird to test something without knowing what it does. I don't know. I would think you would want to test from the user stories specifically, but sure, you should not follow the happy path always when you test.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of weird to say like you don't read the documentation before you test. I mean, I think you'd still would want to do that. To me, I would phrase it differently. I would say test the happy path, as Luis calls it, and then test the non-happy path, which is you type random crap in the date field and see if it blows up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Unless they're trying to get like more like a hallway testing thing that's like random user. Does this user interface just make sense to you, or is it confusing? In which case, I suppose not having knowledge of the application could be handy there.
Yeah. And obviously depends on the type of testing he's doing too. But yeah, I just like the different approach, and that's why TDD is kind of nice when you actually have your set of rules. You write your test to test those rules actually work, and then you write your code and make sure that they pass everything. That definitely makes your coding smoother. Okay, next up we have Ben Adele. He's been working with doing some streaming CSV, some comma separated values this week, but this one was interesting. He was experimenting with lazy queries. Have you ever even heard of lazy queries, Brad? I had not.
I've heard the word lazy used in reference to queries. I haven't looked at this blog post to know what specific thing he's doing. Is he talking about the... Okay, yeah, he's talking
Lazy
about the
equals
CF
true.
query. Yeah, I'm familiar with lazy queries. It's one of those features that was added quite a while ago and probably mentioned in like a Hidden Gems talk by Gert, but never made it into any actual documentation, so pretty much nobody knows it exists.
Yeah, so I thought it was kind of interesting, because if you put lazy equals true on the CF query tag, basically what it does is, just basically only goes and gets the records when you ask for them. So you can't use stuff like record count to see how many records there are, because it didn't actually do the query.
Yeah.
And so basically as you loop through it, it'll go get those additional records. So it was kind of interesting.
I mean, it's a nice feature. I mean, the irony is like, if you were to write an application in Java, like this would be your default method by which you ever interacted with a query. You would run a query, you'd get back some object, and you would just start like iterating over it and processing records. In ColdFusion, we're used to everything being so synchronous. We pull back the entire result set from the database, we stick it in memory, and then we're like, okay, now I will do something with this result set. Which, for the typical ColdFusion web page is fine, right? You pull back like 5 results and you want to loop over them, who cares? But yeah, if you wanted to do like an export for like 1 million database rows, you wouldn't want to read 1 million database rows into memory. There might not be enough RAM for it. So this is a pretty cool feature in that you say, as I loop over them, stream the data, back from the database. I think it's a pretty cool feature. Like I said, I don't remember when Lucy added this, or even if it was back in the Ryla days. Oh, there is actually a documentation page for lazy queries. Wonder how long this page has been around.
And so he obviously tests it. It has a nice little graph here about using normal queries versus lazy queries. I mean, he was doing 50,000 records, per each one. And, he was saying maybe it wasn't enough data. And so it was just an interesting feature, but I thought the comment was really good. Zach obviously chimed in, said you don't have to use query close. It's not required. It'll close it itself. But he said the best use case, or a good use case for this, would be if you're using blobs or clobs in your database, and you don't want to read them all into memory until you get to that record and you actually need it. So that's where it might be useful, where you're storing, binary objects essentially inside your database.
So it looks like the doc page for lazy queries has actually been around since 2018. I had said earlier it had probably never been documented, but I'm pretty certain the feature's older than that. But at least the docs have been around for a while, because I was actually curious how Ben even knew about it, because I think I've only heard about it in one of like Gert's Hidden Gems talks or something. But
yeah.
I like
never
it.
heard
I think
of
it's
it.
pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to change your coding a little bit to handle it. Like I said, record count doesn't exist, and there is additional ongoing calls back to the database. So obviously, you need to figure out when's a good use case for it. But yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool. And then obviously streaming the data back to the browser too, so that's pretty neat as well. So he's done that before with creating zip files, so you can check that out. And so if you're creating a CSV and you've got millions and millions of records, streaming it back to the browser, that would be perfect. So
no, I've talked to Luis about it way back when Luis did CB Streams. I don't know if we actually played with it, because one of the things I've talked to Luis about was I want to have a stream which is based on a lazy query, which again is only a Lucy feature. Adobe ColdFusion doesn't do this. I don't know what it would take, but that would be kind of cool to be able to use CB Streams and of course process the data as it comes back.
I'm sure you
bug
can.
Luis about that and see what it would actually take to have a provider for a stream that pulled records from a query as you process them. Anyway,
Yeah.
I know you can have a stream based on a query now, I believe, but you just have to have the entire query in memory, so it's not incredibly streamish.
Yeah.
At least not from a optimization perspective.
Sounds good. Okay, so next up we have a blog post from Kishore about continuous integration, continuous delivery in ColdFusion 2021. So this is a good one, talking about the DevOps, talking about pipelines and how they can provide many strategic advantages for your organization. And so he talks about the Docker image a little bit more. But basically, long story short, Brian Sappi created a white paper. So this will basically explain how and why you should set up your CI/CD pipeline with Adobe CF 2021. So a lot more information there. So you can download the white paper. But really, it's definitely a big plus. Your life is so much easier once you get the continuous integration sort of piece working. And yeah, so I think this is a real nice thing to have. And Brian's created the white paper. I haven't had a chance to read the white paper yet, but I'm kind of curious what they've done with Adobe CF 2021 to make it even more, special. Because I know that their Docker stuff is a big improvement. Their package management and everything is a big improvement too. The size and everything. So I'm curious how that will be. So if you're looking at possibly doing CI/CD, definitely check this out.
Or use command box.
Oh, Charlie said if you hadn't noticed, it's 78 pages, so it's more than just a simple white paper. So I guess we'll have a look here. How long will it take to pull up?
I have it loaded, but yeah, it's got a lot of screenshots, which I think pads the pages. It appears to be more of like a how-to guide almost, like how to create pipelines and stuff.
Yeah, so it talks about continuous integration and testing, performance monitoring, you got, source control, REST services, so installation steps, configuration.
There's a lot of screenshots in here.
Yeah. So that's good. So more than just a white paper. Thanks for that, Charlie. So very cool. Okay, next up we have a blog post from Adam Cameron, and he's talking about code reviews. And so this one here I thought was kind of interesting, because code reviews, obviously people think they're important, but one of the biggest things, and he brings it up here, is that what is a code review, and most people think of it as a second set of eyes, etc. But I like what he says, what it's not. Basically we're not, just basically telling somebody they did it wrong or they could do it better, or it's not an ego battle. And I think that's a good thing. And here, like Ryan Holiday has a quote saying, "An amateur is defensive. The professional finds learning and even occasionally being shown up to be enjoyable. They like being challenged and humbled. Engage in education as an ongoing and endless process." And it's all about how it's sort of approached. Like if someone gives you a correction in your code because maybe you should do something different, or maybe you should think about something, and maybe you've done it the way that we should do it, but maybe you just got to consider some other factors. But if you get defensive right away, instead of just taking it as a way to learn to improve, then it can sort of ruin the process. So, but he's spouted out pretty detailed. He's a lead tech now, and he's been doing this for quite a while, and it's got a whole lot of guidelines as well. So if you guys are doing code reviews, or maybe you haven't done them yet, this would be good to read. Obviously, everyone's got different opinions that may not be perfect for you guys, but he's getting some really good points in here. So I thought
there's a lot of value in doing in-person or team code reviews, which obviously, like, we can't do that at Ordis because we all work remote. But sitting down with a team and just going through code and just talking about, this differs from our formatting, guidelines, or this is no utility that would have made this a little bit better. Those can be definitely good, I think, learning experiences for the team. And I think you can talk about, some more minor stuff that might seem, pedantic or nitpicky, to comment every single place where the white space was wrong. But if, sitting down in front of a projector as a team and you kind of just scrolling through, you can point out stuff like that as well. That, at least I've enjoyed doing that, being a part of team code reviews before.
Yeah, and it makes a good point too, is that it's not your code or my code, it's our code. We're a team,
unless
we usually
it breaks,
get together,
in which case it's your code.
Well, that's the thing, is like a lot of times it's set up to be, you've decided as a team, through stories and tickets how something should be done, and then so as long as you take it as a team and you're trying to make the team better, it can be a positive experience. And I really enjoy it. Working with Ordis, I get a lot of great devs around me, and I think I get pushed and I learn, and they keep me on task, and and vice versa. I'm sure I do the same to them because I nitpick at everybody else too. It's like, like just simple things like reuse of code, or if I can't understand it, then maybe we need to comment it more or change it, or maybe we can abstract it a little bit better, so yeah, definitely some pros and cons with code reviews, but I think it's definitely a good thing, and it keeps everyone up to speed too. If if you work in your own little silos on different parts of the app, if someone else needs to get in and they have no idea what's going on because they haven't seen the code in 3 years, that can be a negative too. So but anyway, so I thought it was a good blog post.
The other thing I think from a more system perspective is useful when you have new developers is you can use code reviews as a chance to talk more about like the application and how it's architected as a system. Because when I've worked at companies that had a large application that did a lot of stuff, learning ColdFusion or knowing where you put your spaces wasn't always the problem. It was, well, this approach isn't necessarily consistent in our framework for this reason because of how these modules fit together. And those are also things that can, be teachable moments in group code reviews, I think, as well, which is just understanding the overall system that the code's inside of.
Yep. It's just another tool in your tool belt. So, okay.
All right, we got more Ben the Dell.
Yep. So we have another one here about the power and simplicity of CSVs.
Now, I saw this come across Twitter, but I didn't click on it.
Oh my gosh, there's a Brad.
To read it. What? You have me?
Yep, picture of Brad from 2013.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That's from CF Objective or Dev Objective.
Yep, CF
2013.
Objective.
Wow, yeah.
Yep.
That's the first time I met Ben. I think we just randomly had the same shirt on.
Yeah.
We were like, hey.
Too funny. Okay. So.
Okay, it looks like he's doing precisely what I expected he was when I'd seen this come across Twitter. I agree. It is kind of fun. I mean, CSV is really incredibly lightweight and easy to generate. I've actually converted several export features for client apps that were using, CF spreadsheet or some sort of, proprietary, XML based Office format to just plain old CSV, because sometimes they would have really big exports, like, 20,000 records or something. And not only would it take a long time to generate in the server, they would generate these very large files. It would slow the server down. It would consume a lot of memory. And, with the right headers, the right HTTP headers and the right formatting, you can get a file that even in Microsoft Excel will open natively, just like it would, an actual quote unquote Excel file. But, they generate in a fraction of the time, and they're significantly smaller
Yep.
files. So it's definitely, I think, underrated what you can get away with doing. And he has a basic function, like I've written several times, that, just wraps, an individual value in quotes and escapes any quotes inside of it. It's not that complicated just to generate a CSV, and it can really be significantly faster and
Yep.
lightweight than actual Excel file generation.
Yeah,
I love it.
mean, look at it. Nice, simple. Yeah, he's using some nice maps and to list and simple little functions here. And don't get overwhelmed by the number of quotes. But yeah, again, this is a perfect thing to put in a little library somewhere. You've probably written it yourself, several times, but it's really neat. I mean, and it just dumps out the data, and yeah, the quotes and everything, it all work. But yeah, I use them over and over again, and you're right, it's so fast to output them, and they open up and look the way they should. It's pretty neat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading this post. Number 4, serve up that sweet CSV data.
Yeah. Yeah, but it also has like some learnings too about him early in his career and how he's changed. Some people like having all the raw data, as he says, having raw data for their clients sometimes is their happy place. Other people want to just see what's relevant to them. So, but anyway,
I'm a data person. Of course, input is high on my my strength finders. That's in my top 5. So that means I like the data.
Yep. So here's another one we have from Matthew Clemente, and this was interesting. I think you chimed in on Twitter about this, about reading
Well, it's funny
specific
because I
lines from a
swear this
file.
topic comes up like once a year, but a different person like discovers it each time. I've posted about it. Ego's posted about it. Zach's posted about it. Matthew Clemente just posted about it. Yeah, if you want to read a file in ColdFusion, it's like super simple, right? File read, no problem. But sometimes you have a file that's like 8 gigs, or maybe not that big, but some giant log file. You just want to be able to read a part of it, and ColdFusion doesn't really give you a lot built in. You can do file read line, which is pretty sweet. That allows you to kind of stream a file one line at a time, and I've even tweeted about that. The tail command in command box has a sort of a similar implementation, which is close to what Zach had suggested on Twitter, where if you tail a super big file in command box, we use some Java classes that you could just read the last 15 lines of the file, as opposed to having to load the entire file into memory. It's good to have these little kind of tricks up your sleeve if you want to be able to work with really large files and not have your server be running out of heap space.
Yeah. So it was a nice little update he did here to this. He's got a gist, you can see it, whatever. But interesting part about it, and he actually mentioned the podcast in a tweet, was where should we share code snippets for ColdFusion these days? Basically, obviously we have lots of little, tags and libraries, and for the longest time, cflib.org was the place you put things. And you can still get them from there, and I think someone took over. I think Ray handed the mantle over to someone else, and so...
Let's see if... I remember removing the cflib endpoint from command box, I thought. Or is it still in there?
Yeah, so it's been a few years since it was updated. I think someone took over. I don't remember who, but I think it just provided access to all the existing ones, but... Because I know it was shutting down at one point, but I think someone took it over because the data was available to take over.
Okay, maybe I just removed the ReaForge. Let's see, does the download URL still work?
Apparently there's a repo for it. CFlib repo. All the functions of repo are markdown files, Scott said. And so, Anyway, so also Michael Bourne, who works for Audis now, created this site called CF Snippets over a year ago. I think he was doing a blog series and he was showing it off. But apparently Matthew said the site is now down, but he still has the repo up on GitHub. So I know he was, playing with that. I think he was using Elasticsearch and was trying to get everything running, and yeah. So I'll have to check in with Michael and see where he's at on that. But also, of course, we have
Interesting.
ForgeBox, and I think you mentioned on there too, is like, if we think it's something that can get a lot of value for people, then we'll put even simple functions up on ForgeBox, but usually it's sort of a library of things. So what do you think, Brad? I mean, do you think
Yeah,
we need
so
something else, or do you think ForgeBox can handle it? Should we try and get CF snippets up and running again for Michael, or?
CommandBox has a CFlib endpoint where you can say, install CFlib colon and then the name of a CFlib UDF like file info or something, which basically hits the download URL from CFlib directly and then just writes the UDF to a file. And there's even a ColdBox variation of the endpoint that'll wrap it up as a module. It'll put it inside of a CFC and wrap it up inside of a module.
Oh, cool.
However, I haven't tested the CFlib endpoint in CommandBox in probably years, and I'm trying to check the download URL, and I don't think it still works on CFlib. I'm curious if at some point CFlib was converted over to like a static site or something, and
It was.
So I think the endpoint in CommandBox probably quit working at the point in time that CFlib was converted over to a static site, and all the download URLs weren't possible. I think you'd probably have to manually do it. I mean, there's sort of like, two scenarios, right? There's more like the Stack Overflow version where it's like, I wish I had a way to XYZ, and you go Google it and you find the chunk of code and you just copy and paste it and you slam it into a file, and you use it. And that's kind of fine as long as it's on the internet somewhere and you can just copy and paste it. CommandBox sharing things on ForgeBox obviously trended towards the sort of more automated method, which was, this is a helper library that does XYZ, and it's still actively being maintained by its author, and I want to be able to update and check for new versions and install them, and I don't want to just mix it in with my source code. I want it to be installed in a managed location, where it can be more of a third-party library, which is, I think, the spot that ForgeBox fills much better. And of course, you have a couple conventions you have to follow. It needs to be a package. You need to have a box.json. You have to actually publish it. But I mean, that just takes a couple seconds to do. The question is, is it worth putting every single random little function that anybody's ever came up with on ForgeBox? I mean, and I don't know the answer. I mean, the NPM world is obviously done that, because someone in the Twitter thread kind of made a reference to LeftPad.
Yeah, broke everybody's stuff.
Well, yeah, LeftPad became infamous when the publisher like unpublished it or something, and thousands of builds all over the NPM universe all quit working. But yeah, the LeftPad function was some just insanely simple like string manipulation, just a few lines of code. But it was its own package out there on npmjs.org that you could include and you could use. I mean, as ColdFusion developers and using ForgeBox and CommandBox, we have that ability. We have the ability to install it and manage it. It needs to actually be a box module in the context of a ColdBox app to truly have the equivalent ability that NPM has, where it actually goes into some sort of convention folder where you can load it up via Wirebox. But that aside, I don't know if every random 5-line UDF belongs on ForgeBox, but if people want to add it, I really don't care. I mean, ForgeBox allows for unlimited, public packages with free accounts. So if people want to add little one-offs, I'm not going to stop them. And you don't have to add box modules to ForgeBox. You can just choose the package or the project type rather, and it can just be a CFM file. I mean, that can be an entire package on ForgeBox. It's a CFM file, the box.json, and then people could just, CF included in their applications. So I don't want to really tell people not to do it from a management standpoint. I think a lot of people are more likely just to copy and paste a UDF, off the internet. That's just kind of a little quick and dirty fix for something.
Yeah, but then again, if something like that happens and that like Matthew made some improvements to it, it'd be kind of nice to know there's a new version out there that made a change or a fix or something.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
if it's
tough
going to
one.
morph and change over time, then I think it really benefits, first of all, being in source control, in GitHub or something where people can send pull requests and it can have a singular location. And then being managed by an actual package manager like CommandBox that can say, hey, there's a new version of this. Would you like to install it? Which is why I probably trend more towards using ForgeBox for anything. But, I've written little quick and dirty UDFs that I'm like, somebody else might want this, but I don't know if it's worth me creating a package out of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it boils down to how much free time I have, probably, but it's
Yeah, but
definitely
like
an
you
interesting
said,
conversation.
the more times you use, you're like, okay, I should just make this a module because I'm using it in multiple places now.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what
the
I did with
Frappy
that
thing.
Fusion. Yeah, that Fusion Reactor API SDK, the Frappuccino SDK. It's like but after I'd copied and pasted that into like at least 4 or 5 projects, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I should have broken this out into its own repo by now, like because I've got like 5 versions of a thing, and that's just not right.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the breaking point is. Maybe it's just when it becomes a pain point, you're like, wow, this sucks. I have 4 copies of this. I should, you know, combine them. But anyway.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, well, so I'll check in with Michael Bourne and see what he thinks about that. And I mean, we can look at the CFlib thing as well. But yeah, I think if it has any substance, I mean, I think ForgeBox is a good thing. And then
Scott Steinbeck just mentioned in the chat here that you can put stuff in a gist. It is worth mentioning that you can install gist directly from CommandBox, just like you can in PM. You can do box install gist : and then I don't know if it's the ID of the gist. It's in the docs. I rarely ever use it, but it's supported by CommandBox. So I mean that is a way we can at least have it in like somewhat pseudo source control, if you will. And be able to install it. But that's still not like a full-on package. There's no version associated. There's no outdated version. It's kind of halfway there,
yeah, cool.
Anyway.
Yeah, interesting discussion. So I don't know if that answered anything, Matthew, or not, but I guess we'll go. Yep, Scott's giving you a whole bunch of tips for your book there, Brad. Just everything you talked about today. We're up to 85 already, apparently.
I'm just going to take my CommandBox 103 tips is just going to be random pages from the docs. I'm just going to write a random number generator, just pulls a page out of a docs. It's like, boom, tip 87. Boom, tip 93. It'll be easy.
Okay, next up.
So what do we have from Freitag? URL safe base64 encoding / decoding in CFML. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, so he was talking about, obviously you can do standard base64 encoded strings. So you got the base64 function to binary to string, or the binary to code function. But if you needed to pass that encoded value in a URL, it may be much easier just to deal with some of the Java classes. And so here he gives you a little bit of, some tips and how to do it. It looks like a mouthful there. If you copy paste it, it'll save yours.
What happens if you pass binary into the encode for URL functions, which use the ASAPI stuff behind the scenes? I've only used them for plain text. I'm kind of curious what they would even do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, because
they just puke.
So I mean, he gets a Java object, gets a URL encoder, then without padding, then encode to string, and then telling the type of bytes. So it's kind of a headache. But
I'm trying to decide if this is a code smell. Like, hey, you're passing stuff in the URL that probably doesn't belong in the URL. Why are you passing binary objects in the URL in the first place? You're probably going to hit some limit of how long a URL is even allowed to be.
Yeah, it might just be the type of code. I mean, I've worked with stuff like LDAP systems that their keys are binary. That's just the way they store them. Base64 binary codes, etc. But I mean, I guess if I was going to a user profile and using their primary key, which is an LDAP binary code, I would need it. But yeah, so anyway, it's a nice little tip if you're dealing with that. Again, you can always drop down to Java. You can always find a function there somewhere.
What does his Java version do that two base64 to binary and to string don't do?
It doesn't URL encode it safely.
Well, wouldn't URL encoding be a second concern? Wouldn't you turn it into base64 first and then URL encode it?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. What is he doing?
I mean, his URL safe base64 decoder. I mean, so basically he uses base64 and it has to get URL encoder. I
So
don't know.
what
It still
he's
seems like it's more code. I mean, I
no,
would
he's
think you would wrap it into base 64 and you would wrap that with encode for URL and you'd be done.
I think it's the string you're passing in is binary already. So he's just getting the UTF bytes, encoding it, and then without padding, and then yeah, I
Yeah, I
think it,
just don't quite see what he's doing and how that's different from using to base 64 and encode for URL, which are first class functions of CFML.
I don't know. I guess you could do a test and see if they output the same stuff, or if there's some slight difference in the encoding.
I doubt it's the same. I only say that because the SAPI stuff tends to go nutso on the type of characters it escapes, but
Oh, okay.
built-in functions are quite handy. But if you want to pass the encoded value in URL or simply want a nicer looking encoding, maybe that's what he's talking about. Of course, you could also
Oh,
use the URL encoded format, which is the pre-SAPI function that doesn't escape nearly as many things. I think that only escapes like, you know, like percent signs and equal signs and ampersands or something.
gotcha. Okay.
Interesting. Oh well, I guess it's never a bad thing to have options.
Yep.
Even though I'm not entirely sure why I would use it at this point. But
Well, I guess when it comes up, you can figure it out.
maybe
Then.
if he's listening, maybe he can update his little post to show this is what it would look like if you use the CFML functions. This is how much code it is. This is the output, and this is the equivalent in mine. You know,
Yeah.
in his suggestion, so we can
Yeah.
actually kind of see what the difference is between them.
Maybe he's got much better URL or something. That's what it sounds like. So, good idea, Brad. Pete, get on it.
You're not busy enough already.
Yep. So we have one more from Benny Dow. So this is expected and unexpected get base tag data behavior in Lucy, and I saw this one came out last week. And so he was talking about, excuse me, that basically, we have ancestors of tags, and if you get the get base tag list, you can figure out the name of the ColdFusion custom tag that you need to access. But basically, we're just saying how, depending on the type of tag you were using and the way the tag was invoked, sometimes this get base tag data doesn't give you the right information.
Interesting. So from CF Docs, get base tag data. I don't even know if I'm familiar with this bit. Used within a custom tag, finds calling or ancestor tag by name and accesses its data. And so it takes a tag name attribute and then an optional level attribute. I don't think I've ever used this.
Yeah. A lot of people keep away from custom tags. I mean, there's definitely some use cases for them, and Ben's found some good ones lately.
I'm just trying to figure out. So there's the example on CF Docs as tag data equals get base tag data CF underscore mapper, and then it does tag data dot this tag dot execution mode not equal to inactive. Interesting. So if you had a custom tag inside of a custom tag and you wanted to base your inner custom tag based on a parameter passed to the outer custom tag, I don't like this at all. This as far as design pattern, I mean, it feels like you're breaking encapsulation. If my nested tag needed to know what the execution mode of the outer tag was, I would say the outer tag should have passed it in. Like,
Yeah.
this just feels weird. I mean, imagine the same thing with functions. Like, if the function calls another function or a UDF, there's no way from an inner UDF to like reach out, 3 functions higher and say what were your arguments. And you wouldn't want to. That would be sort of like terrible from a coding standpoint. It'd be like, well, if the inner function needs to know it, it should have been passed in via the argument scope. This whole, and this isn't reflecting on Ben's post. This is obviously a feature that ColdFusion just provides that apparently I didn't really realize existed. But I'm just thinking, I don't think I would ever use this. Like the concept of an inner custom tag, like reaching out of its context and, extracting information from its parent tag that wasn't explicitly passed in.
Yeah. And the big takeaway here is
Huh.
that Adobe does it the way you expect it to, and Lucy doesn't check for base tag data unless the invocation expression starts with a CF underscore. So that's
Oh,
essentially.
so when you use CF module, it doesn't count?
Doesn't seem to, no. So that's
Makes
the big takeaway
sense.
from there. Whether you like the way it works or not, if you're using it, that's sort of the key.
Well, yeah, I get it. Even though I don't like it, I mean, heck, it should work as it's advertised on the tin, as Adam Cameron says. So I was looking in here to see if he filed the ticket, and it looks like he did. He put in LDEV 3359. I had missed this blog post and this ticket somehow 6 days ago. What was I doing 6 days ago? I wasn't paying attention. calling base tag list inside CF module execution. Well, it's been triaged. It's in the backlog. Looks like Pothies has confirmed the behavior, and
Okay.
there we go.
Cool. So that wraps up our blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. Next up, we got Find a Job. And for that, we'll look at getcfmljobs.com. We see there's been 6 released in the last week. So we got a senior software engineer in West Palm Beach. We got a ColdFusion software developer in Sherwood Park. And that's Alberta, Canada. We have a freelance position for mid-level developer in remote United States.
What position?
A freelance position.
Oh, freelance. I heard pre-launch. I'm like, they're launching?
Sorry.
Freelance isn't nearly as interesting.
Yeah. So a couple in India as well. We got a senior software developer, and we've got just a ColdFusion developer. These look like they might be the same posts, actually. Sometimes the site scrapes different sites and brings them in.
Yeah,
We also have
the HR department puts it in several places on the internet.
Yep.
I actually, I saw someone posting some job postings in the jobs channel on CFML Slack.
That's another
and then the
good
same
place.
job posting in the Facebook ColdFusion user group as well.
Yeah, and those are 2 other great spots to look for a job if you are looking. The CFML Slack has a jobs channel, and then Facebook has quite a few ColdFusion groups. I think one big one and a couple of smaller ones. So if you're looking for jobs, there's 6 here from the last week. But yeah, those are definitely good places to look too. Okay. So next up on our list, we have our ForgeBox module of the week.
Module of the week. It's already up to version 2.4? What? How is this possible?
Yep, so the module of the week is actually JMESPath by Scott Steinbeck.
Did we talk about this last week in the podcast?
We've mentioned before that he's been working on this this cool little tool that was going to be going into Command Box 5.3 when you release it.
The first version released was 2.4. It came out as 2.4. It's like being born as a teenager. How is this possible, Scott? What happened to your 1.0 version?
Yeah, but so this is basically an implementation of JMESPath for ColdFusion. So Scott did a lot of good work, basically converting over the API from the JavaScript version, right? I know there was a couple of different versions out there.
He took a JavaScript implementation and ported it to ColdFusion. So I had never heard of JMESPath before Scott and I were working on this, but I had heard of JQ, and chances are you may have heard of the JQ binary on Linux, but you've never heard of JMESPath. So JQ is a binary you see in builds a lot, where you can point it at a JSON file, and then you can run sort of like queries. Think of XPath for XML, right? Where you say search for nodes with this name, blah, 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 with these attributes. Think of that, but for JSON instead. And so JQ is kind of the popular binary that a lot of people use to read stuff out of JSON files. What I never knew was the name of the standard is called JMESPath. That's what JQ implements. And there's a bunch of implementations in different programming languages like JavaScript, Python, you name it, right? But there wasn't one for ColdFusion. And Scott and I have been talking, wouldn't it be sweet to be able to do the stuff that JQ does, but from inside of Command Box? And so Scott spun off this JMESPath project as a standalone ColdFusion-based implementation of the JMESPath, which is what JQ uses. And then the next version of Command Box, which I'm actually writing the release notes for right now, has Scott's JMESPath module bundled inside of it. And we've already plugged it into several commands inside of Command Box. There's a new JQ command, which behaves almost identically to the JQ binary in Linux. And then there's JQ functionality that Scott's built into the package show and the config show and the server show commands. It's actually really sweet. I'm excited about it because I only knew of maybe 2% of what the JMESPath spec provided for, because all I'd ever seen JQ used for was just read a top level key out of a struct or out of an object in a JSON file, which, you can do that, but that's so simple. It supports a crap ton of stuff. You can filter, you can loop, you can map and reduce. There's functions built in. It's actually really sweet. You can consume an entire JSON document, spin it around, reformat it, and spit out like a brand new JSON document, all in a single query or filter or whatever you call it. So
yeah,
this
neat.
This module's pretty sweet. And Scott just used the original unit test suite from the JavaScript implementation that he borrowed. So he knew that his ColdFusion implementation still had all the exact same, to spec behaviors of the original one. And then he sprinkled in a bunch of kind of additions to it based on how we thought it would work nicely. But we've got a new page coming in the command box docs as well that covers some of the usages. And I think it's going to be one of the super cool features of command box 5.3 is this thing. But since Scott put it on ForgeBox as just a standalone module, if you there sitting at home want to have this kind of functionality in any random ColdFusion app, you could just drop this in as a dependency and use it inside of a web app. And one of the things that Scott and I have talked about is along the Graph APIs or GraphQL kind of concept is, what if you had an API that returned JSON and you could give the server, a query filter or something, a JMESPath spec string that said, give me back the list of users, but massage it in this particular format. And that all happens server side, and you got the result back from the API request. There's all sorts of really interesting ideas.
That's a really neat idea. I was excited when you guys mentioned that.
Yeah, so our first use case of this was plugging it into command box, and I think it's worked splendidly so far from what I've seen. Either that or just nobody's testing the command box bleeding edge intent. But I'm really super excited to see what we can do dropping this library into just, ColdBox APIs or, anything like that.
Yep, for sure. I mean, it'll take some work to get used to because there is a lot of cool functionality in it. But Scott also mentioned in the chat, the reason it's 2.4 is it's matching the other library, the original library. So that way, this is up to 2.4.
So this release is so packed full of features and functionality as a baby. Yep. It's like Winamp. So Winamp 5, so sweet they skipped the number. Or was it Winamp 4? Whatever it was, it's like that. We skipped all those other numbers because it's so sweet.
Exactly. So very cool. Okay, next up we have our VSCode hints, tips, and tricks of the week. So this one here is a pretty simple one. A lot of these are, but they're still very useful. And so this is the highlight matching tag. And you've probably got something similar to this you've used or seen, but I liked how obvious this one was when you're clicking on your code. It highlights it in the right hand menu really quickly and easily. Where's the matching tag? Sometimes you got some pretty crazy nested tags and
it's like the gutter. Yeah. If you're not watching the video version of a podcast, like in the right hand gutter of the page, it highlights for you the start and stop part of it.
Yeah,
that's nice.
It's, real simple. There are a lot of options for it and everything, but I mean, it works with tags, but also some JavaScript functions too, braces and everything. And it'll work with different libraries and languages. But again, that one is called Highlight Matching Tag, and again, it's almost got 1 million downloads or whatever, but pretty useful little feature, a little extension. All those make your life a little easier. Okay, last but not least, we have our Patreon supporters. So, again, we have 36 wonderful Patreon supporters right now, and they're contributing over 83% of this podcast funding. I should ask Luis for a bump in funding. But we have ColdBox, Command Box, ForgeBox, Test Box, all these other boxes are supported by Ortus and these Patreon supporters, and so it all helps. If they're a bronze package holder or higher, they also now get a free ForgeBox Pro account and a CFCast subscription as a perk for their Patreon subscription. And if you're not a bronze package or up, you still do get a special little badge on our community website for Ortus, and you also have your own private forum access on the community site as well. So those are a couple little perks for any of our Patreon supporters there. So I think it's time to read all these beautiful names. Is it your turn, Brad?
Why not? We made Luis do it last week, so I don't remember who did it before that.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so thanks to our Patreon supporters, Don Bellamy, Eric Hoffman, David Bellinger, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Jonathan Perrett, Mario Rodriguez, Jeffrey McGee from Sunstar Media, John Wilson from Synaptrix, Yogesh Mathur, Joseph Lamry, Ben Liddell, Brett DeLion, Carl von Stetten, Shirley Earhart, Dan Card, Daniel Garcia, Didier Lesnicki, Edgardo Cabezas, Jan Yannick, Jason Diger, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, Jordan Clark, Kai Koenig, but wait, there's more. Laxma, last name starts with a T, Leon, Sarah Mellis, I'm think I'm right on that one. Matthew Darby, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Patrick Flynn, Ross Phillips, almost there, Scott Steinbeck, Stephanie Monge, and Stephen Klotz.
Yep. Thank you all. You guys are great. We really appreciate it. And if you want to see their pretty faces, you can go to autosolutions.com/about-us/sponsors. And that brings us to the end of another week. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget about all those webinars going on this week and coming up very soon. Check out the show notes for all the links. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernizeordie.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.